Thunder cracked like rifle fire across the Nevada sky, and Nahuel pressed his weathered palm against the charred timber of Luther Crowley's barn. 3 years. 3 seasons of mourning since he'd last walked this cursed ground, and the stench of old smoke still clung to everything like a sickness that wouldn't heal. Rain hammered the blackened bones of what had been a thriving ranch, turning ash to mud that sucked at his moccasins. Lightning split the darkness, revealing twisted fence posts and the rusted skeleton of a water trough, all that remained of the place where his world had died. Tonight, he'd come to burn the last of Itzel's sacred sage, to speak the words that would free her spirit from this place of torment, to finally silence the voices that whispered his name in the wind. But as he stepped through the collapsed doorway, a sound stopped him cold. Crying, weak, desperate, barely human, his hand found the bone-handled knife at his belt. Could be a trap. Crowley had been fever dead for months, but his poison lived on in the men who'd served him. They might know the Apache warrior would come. The sound came again, weaker now, fading. From the back where the horse stalls had been, Nahuel moved like smoke through the debris, 52 years of survival making each step silent. The White Mountain Apache had taught him to read death in the wind's whisper, in the way shadows fell. Every broken board told him a story. In the third stall beneath rotting hay, he found her, a baby, pale as winter moonlight, wrapped in what might have been a dress. 3 weeks old, maybe less. Her breath came in tiny gasps, each one a struggle. Around her neck hung an obsidian pendant, a hummingbird carved with the distinctive markings of his clan. The same pendant he'd made for Itzel when she'd carried their child. The only one of its kind. Mother of God, he whispered. As he lifted the infant, her blanket fell away. A small deerskin pouch lay against her chest, marked with symbols he knew better than his own heartbeat. Apache glyphs. Itzel's hand stitching. Don't move. The voice cracked with youth and fear. Nahuel turned slowly, the baby cradled against his chest. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, lean, maybe 21. A rifle shook in his hands. "You're Jacob Crowley," Nahuel said. The boy flinched. "How? Got your daddy's jaw? Your mama's scared eyes?" "She's my sister." Jacob's voice barely rose above the storm. "Half-sister. I brought her here to die. Father made me promise." Thunder crashed, and in the distance, Nahuel heard hoofbeats. Riders coming hard. "But you came back," Nahuel said. "I tried to let her die. God help me, I tried." Jacob's composure cracked. "Left her 3 days ago. Figured the cold would take her. But I kept hearing her cry, even miles away." "Who's riding?" Jacob's face went white. "Deputy Holt. He's been hunting mixed-blood children. Says they're a plague." "How many?" 11, all killers." Nahuel felt the baby stir her tiny fist, grasping at his shirt. If she carried Itzel's charms, she was more than precious, she was dangerous. "The Apache woman your father kept. What was her name?" "Ayelen. Said it meant joy." Jacob's voice grew quiet. "She was beautiful, gentle. He kept her in a cabin, treated her like breeding stock." "Yes." "Did she have markings?" 3 lines on her left shoulder. "Clan marks," Father said. "The Bear Clan. Itzel's clan. The marks he'd traced in the darkness of their lodge before the world turned to blood." "Sweet Jesus," Nahuel breathed. "You're holding my daughter." Jacob's rifle clattered to the floor. "What? Ayelen was my wife. Her true name was Itzel." 3 years of grief crashed over him. "This baby is mine." Hoofbeats grew louder. Holt was positioning his men. "Can you ride?" Nahuel asked. "Yes, but..." "Then mount up, we're leaving." Jacob shouldered his rifle steadier now. Where Holt knows every trail, not the sacred ones. He wrapped the baby tighter, tucking the pendant beneath the cloth. His daughter, Itzel's daughter. The child he'd mourned was alive, fighting for breath in his arms. Her name. Father called her Willow, said she'd break like the tree. No, she's Apache, she's iron. A rifle shot cracked wood splintering. Holt's voice boomed. A Jacob Crowley. Come out and we'll make it quick. Nahuel met Jacob's eyes. Terror, yes, but also desperate courage. Ride with me and there's no going back. Your father's name won't save you. Jacob checked his rifle. My father's name is a curse. They slipped through the barn's rotted back wall as gunfire erupted from the front. Jacob's paintmare, Esperanza, stood behind the smokehouse, ears pricked with nervous energy. Hold her tight, Nahuel said, handing over the baby. If she dies, everything dies. I won't let that happen. They rode hard for Devil's Canyon, the storm masking their escape. Behind them, shouts rose as Holt's men discovered empty stalls. The pursuit followed 11 riders, all armed, all hungry for blood. Oh, there... Holt's voice cracked like a whip. The canyon, don't let them reach the wash. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the storm like deadly stars. Bullets whined past striking rocks, sending up sprays of stone chips. Nahuel ran beside the horse with fluid grace, his breath controlled despite the pace. The canyon entrance loomed a jagged wound in the earth that swallowed light. At night, in a storm, it was suicide. Perfect. They plunged into darkness as the first shot echoed off the walls. Lightning turned the narrow passage into a maze of shadows and stone. Water rushed somewhere below the sound, growing louder. Flash flood. Jacob said, fear tight in his voice. Good. White men fear floodwater. But hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls. Holt was pushing forward, gambling he could catch them before the water rose. A Jacob. Holt's voice reverberated through stone. You're riding with a savage, he'll gut you when you're useless. Don't listen, keep moving. The canyon floor sloped upward, taking them from the flood zone. But the path was treacherous, loose rock hid in crevices that could cripple a horse. Willow began to cry, her voice carrying to their pursuers. She's hungry, Jacob said. Cold. We need shelter. There's a place, sacred ground. They won't follow. Why not? Because it's where their nightmares live. They climbed higher, following paths invisible to untrained eyes. Nahuel's heritage showed the way, stone markers, rock placements that indicated safe passage. This was Apache territory, and he knew every secret. Behind them, the pursuit struggled. City horses couldn't match mountain stock. The gap widened. The place we're going, Nahuel said. It's not just shelter, it's a tomb. What do you mean? You'll see. They reached a ledge where canyon walls opened into a small valley. Hidden behind thorns and seemingly impassable rock was the entrance to what the Apache called the Cave of Sorrows. Help me clear this, Nahuel said. They worked quickly, pulling aside natural camouflage to reveal a narrow opening. The cave beyond was massive, its walls carved smooth by centuries of water. What lay scattered across the floor made Jacob's blood freeze. Bones. Human bones gleaming white in darkness. Skulls stared with empty sockets. Among them, smaller remains that could only belong to children. Jesus Christ, Jacob whispered. Nahuel lit a torch flame, revealing Apache symbols carved into stone. This was a massacre. 23 souls. They came here to hide from cavalry, from my father's unit, from soldiers he guided. Your father knew this place, led them here. Nahuel's voice was deadly quiet. The children died first, to break the warriors. Jacob stared at the bones, face pale. He never said. White men don't remember shame. Willow's crying grew weaker. The baby was fading, her body too small to fight cold and hunger. She needs medicine, Apache medicine. Nahuel searched the cave walls for specific plants. Cave moss for hydration. Healing roots that could be chewed and mixed with water. He worked with a healer's skill, preparing the mixture. Voices echoed through the entrance. Holt's men had found the thorn barrier. They're coming, Jacob said. Let them. This is sacred ground. The dead will fight beside us. But another sound reached them, tracking hounds bred for hunting human prey. They brought hunters, Jacob said, fear in his voice. Then we make our stand, among the bones of my people. Nahuel finished the medicine, feeding it to Willow drop by drop. The baby's mouth moved weakly, trying to swallow the bitter mixture. If we don't survive, Jacob said, what happens to her? We survive, because she's the future, and the future doesn't die in a cave. The first hound appeared nose to ground. Behind it, shadowy figures moved through darkness. Time to see what the dead think of visitors, Nahuel said, drawing his knife. The attack came with dawn's first light, when gray illumination gave Holt's men enough visibility to see their targets. 11 riders had become 10-1, had fallen into a crevice during the night climb. But 10 professional killers were still overwhelming odds. Spread out, Holt commanded. Watch for traps. The savage knows we're coming. They moved into the cave like wolves stalking prey rifles, ready eyes scanning for movement. The bone field stopped them momentarily. Even hardened men felt the weight of so much death. What is this place? Asked Briggs Holt's second in command. Apache burial ground, Holt replied. Makes it fitting. We'll add fresh bones to the pile. But Deputy Holt had made his first mistake. He'd brought his men into a place where Nahuel held every advantage. The Apache warrior knew this cave like his own heartbeat. Every shadow, every echo, every loose stone. He'd spent the night preparing using skills learned in childhood raids against enemy tribes. The first trap triggered when Vargas, the Mexican tracker, stepped on what appeared to be solid ground. The cave floor, undermined by careful work, gave way. He fell screaming into a pit lined with sharpened bones, Apache war spikes crafted in the old way. Jesus, Briggs shouted, watch your footing. But Nahuel was already moving. He flowed through the shadows like smoke, his knife finding the throat of the nearest man before a sound could escape. The body dropped among the ancient bones, adding fresh blood to old. Where is he? Holt demanded, spinning in circles. Everywhere, came the whispered reply from the darkness. A second man fell arrow through his eye. Then a third strangled by a cord that appeared from nowhere. Holt's force was being decimated by a ghost. Light, we need light, Holt shouted. They lit torches, but the flames only created more shadows, more places for death to hide. The cave walls seemed alive with movement, ancient symbols dancing in the flickering light. Are there... Briggs pointed to a figure darting between rock formations. Rifle fire erupted, bullets sparking off stone. But when the smoke cleared, their target was gone. He's toying with us, muttered Thompson, the youngest of Holt's men. Then we'll stop playing games. Holt snarled. Use the charges. They pulled out bundles of dynamite, improvised explosives designed to bring down cave roofs. It was a desperate tactic, but effective. If they couldn't hunt Nahuel, they'd bury him. Light the fuses, Holt commanded. But as they prepared to blow the cave, Jacob emerged from behind a boulder rifle trained on the deputy's chest. I wouldn't do that, the young man said. Jacob. Holt's voice mixed surprise with rage. You're alive? Disappointed. Relieved. Now come here, boy. Away from the savage. No. The single word carried absolute conviction. Jacob Crowley, raised to fear and obey authority, had found something worth defying it for. That baby you're after. Jacob continued. She's innocent. A child. You want to kill a child. I want to kill a mongrel, Holt replied. Before it breeds more of its kind, then you'll have to kill me first. The standoff stretched taut. 7 men against 1 boy and an Apache warrior. But the cave's confined space negated their numerical advantage. That's when Nahuel made his move. He emerged from the shadows behind Holt's men, but not attacking. Instead, he carried something that made every man freeze. A bundle of dynamite with a lit fuse. Gentlemen, Nahuel said calmly, I believe you dropped something. The fuse hissed, burning down fast. Holt's men scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and bone piles. But there was nowhere to run in the narrow cave. "You're bluffing," Holt shouted. "You'll kill yourself." "Apache don't fear death," Nahuel replied. "We fear dishonor, and letting you live would be the greatest dishonor of all." The fuse burned shorter. 5 seconds. 4. 3. "Wait," Holt screamed. "I'll make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Information I know about the network, the trafficking operation. There are others powerful men." 2 seconds. "Talk fast." "Judge Morrison in Silver Creek. He's the real power behind this. He's got facilities, buyers, a whole network." 1 second. Nahuel smiled coldly and snuffed out the fuse. The silence that followed was deafening. Holt's men emerged from cover, shaking, humiliated. Their leader had shown fear, had begged for his life. "You son of a bitch," Holt whispered. "The bomb was real," Nahuel said. "My willingness to use it was real. Your cowardice was real. But I'm not a murderer of children, white man. Unlike you." He tossed the dynamite aside, but his knife was already moving. It took Holt in the throat before the deputy could draw his gun. "Then now," Nahuel said to the remaining men, "you have a choice. Leave and spread word that this place is cursed, or stay and join your leader among the bones." They chose to leave. 6 professional killers broken by one Apache warrior and a boy who'd found his courage. But as they departed, Briggs called back, "This isn't over. Morrison will send more men, better men." "Let him try," Nahuel replied. As the cave fell silent, Jacob slumped against a rock wall, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. "Is it over?" "This part is." But Holt was right about one thing. There are others. Morrison. And whoever Morrison serves. This network he mentioned, it's bigger than just trafficking. It's about power, control. Nahuel checked on Willow, who had slept through the entire battle. The medicine was working. Color was returning to her pale cheeks. "She's stronger," Jacob observed. "Apache children are born fighters. She'll survive whatever comes." "What about us?" "We survive too, because she needs us to." They gathered their gear and prepared to leave the Cave of Sorrows. But first, Nahuel performed a ritual over the ancient bones, speaking words in the old language. "What are you saying?" Jacob asked. "I'm telling them their wait is over. Justice has been served. They can rest now. And us, we keep fighting. For her. For all the children like her." As they emerged from the cave, the morning sun painted the sky blood red. Behind them, the place of death had become a place of victory. But ahead lay Silver Creek and Judge Morrison, and secrets that would test their resolve in ways they couldn't imagine. The war was far from over. But they had won the first battle, and sometimes that was enough to keep hope alive. 2 days later, they reached Silver Creek under a sky the color of old brass. The town squatted between twin mesas like a scab on the earth, its buildings weathered gray by wind and alkali dust. Smoke rose from scattered chimneys, and the ring of hammer on anvil echoed from the blacksmith's shop. But something was wrong. The streets were too empty, the windows too dark. The few people visible watched them with suspicious eyes. "It's a trap," Nahuel said. "How can you tell?" "The dogs. There should be dogs in a town this size. They've been cleared out, so they won't bark warnings." Judge Morrison's house sat on the hill above Main Street, a 2-story monument to territorial justice, with white columns and a wraparound porch. It was the kind of place that announced its owner's importance. "We can't just ride up to his door," Jacob said. "No, but we can't leave either, not with what we know." They'd spent the journey discussing their options. The evidence against Morrison was circumstantial. Holt's dying words, the trafficking network, the connection to Willow. But it might be enough to force a confession. "What about the baby?" Jacob asked. Willow was sleeping in an improvised cradle, stronger now, but still fragile. Taking her into danger felt like heresy. but leaving her alone was impossible. She comes with us. If Morrison is behind this, she's the key to everything. They approached the house from the rear, using the stable as cover. But as they dismounted, a voice called out from the shadows, "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Judge Morrison emerged from behind a water trough, flanked by 6 armed men. These weren't local deputies. They wore the blue uniforms of territorial militia, their faces hard with professional competence. "Good evening, gentlemen," Morrison said, his earlier nervousness replaced by cold confidence. "I believe we have business to discuss." "You're under arrest," Jacob said, trying to assert authority he didn't possess. "Am I on what charge?" "Human trafficking, child slavery, murder." Morrison's laugh was like breaking glass. "You'll need evidence for such accusations. And witnesses. Do you have either?" "We have Holt's confession. Holt is dead, and dead men tell no tales in court." Nahuel stepped forward, his hand on his knife. "We have the children. The ones you stole. Where are they now?" "Safe." "Are they? Are you certain of that?" Morrison's smile was cold and triumphant. At his signal, more men emerged from the barn. They were carrying something that made Nahuel's blood freeze. A child. A Apache boy, maybe 8 years old, bound and gagged. His eyes were wide with terror, but there was something else there, recognition. "Taze," Nahuel whispered. "Your son," Morrison confirmed. "Very much alive, and very much under my control." Twist 1. The broken son, the boy who had been Nahuel's pride and joy, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, clean-shaven, dressed in white man's clothes, his once proud bearing replaced by submissive posture. "Hello, father," Taze said, his voice flat and emotionless. "My son." Nahuel took a step forward, but rifles swung in his direction. "Not your son anymore," Morrison said. "My creation. 3 years of careful training have made him into something far more valuable than a wild Apache child." "What did you do to him?" "I educated him. Taught him the futility of resistance, the benefits of cooperation. He's been quite useful, actually." "Who do you think told me you were coming to Silver Creek?" The betrayal hit Nahuel like a physical blow. His own son turned against him. The boy he'd taught to hunt, to fight, to be proud of his heritage, now a weapon in the enemy's hands. "You're lying," Jacob said. "Am I Taze? Tell them about the Apache camps you've located for us. The families you've helped us relocate. 17 camps." Taze recited like a schoolboy. 234 individuals processed, 73 children extracted for training. "Processed," Nahuel's voice cracked. "We were killed," Morrison translated. "Your son has been quite the efficient little scout. Haven't you, boy?" "Yes, sir." The words were spoken without emotion, without remorse. Whatever Morrison had done to Taze, it had broken something essential in his spirit. "He's not my son anymore," Nahuel said quietly. "No." Morrison agreed. "He's mine. And if you want him to live, you'll do exactly as I say." "What do you want?" "Simple. The baby. And your cooperation in expanding our operation." "What operation?" "The one you've stumbled into. The trafficking network is just the beginning. We're building something far more ambitious." Morrison gestured to his men, and they began to spread out, surrounding their captives. But as they moved, Nahuel noticed something that gave him hope. The barn doors were slightly ajar, and in the darkness beyond, he caught a glimpse of movement. They weren't alone. "You see," Morrison continued, "the Apache problem has never been about land or resources. It's been about labor. Your people possess skills that can't be replicated tracking survival combat. Skills that are incredibly valuable in the right context." "You're talking about slavery." "I'm talking about evolution. The old ways are dying, but the useful parts can be preserved, improved upon. Your son is proof of that." The attack came from 3 directions at once. Apache warriors poured from the barn, their faces painted for war, their weapons gleaming in the evening light. At the same time, federal agents emerged from the main house badges, gleaming guns drawn. Federal agents, shouted a familiar voice. "Drop your weapons." It was Mitchell, the man who had posed as Deputy Holt. He was leading a team of genuine law enforcement officers, their badges and authority real. "You're surrounded, Morrison," Mitchell called out. "Surrender now and we'll discuss terms." For a moment, it seemed like salvation. The cavalry had arrived, justice would be served, and the trafficking network would be exposed. But then Taze spoke. "It's a trap, Father. They're not here to help." "What?" "Agent Mitchell. He's been working for Morrison all along. This is all theater." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. The rescue was fake, the federal agents were corrupt, and they were more trapped than ever. "Surprised?" Morrison asked. "Did you really think we'd operate a network this large without government protection?" Mitchell removed his badge and tossed it aside. "Sorry, boys. Nothing personal. Just business." "You son of a bitch," Jacob snarled. Now. Let's keep this civilized. You're going to come with us quietly and nobody gets hurt. And if we refuse, then people get hurt, starting with the baby." One of Morrison's men stepped forward, his rifle trained on Willow. The infant was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger surrounding her. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't I? She's valuable, yes, but not irreplaceable. There are other children, other bloodlines." Nahuel felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by enemies on all sides. But they still had one advantage: the Apache warriors who had emerged from the barn were real. And they were led by someone Nahuel recognized. Chato, his oldest friend, his brother in arms, the man who had taught him to fight. "Chato," Nahuel called out. "Don't do this. These men are poison." "I'm sorry, my friend," Chato replied. "But they have something I need." "What?" "My daughter. They took her 6 months ago. They say if I cooperate, she'll be returned to me." Morrison's smile widened. "You see, everyone has a price. Everyone has someone they care about more than principles." "Where is she?" Chato demanded. "Safe. For now. But her continued safety depends on your cooperation." "I've done everything you asked. I've betrayed my own people. And you'll continue to do so. Because the alternative is watching your daughter die." It was the perfect trap. Morrison hadn't just corrupted individuals, he'd corrupted the bonds between them. Friend against friend, father against son, principle against love. "Now," Morrison said, "let's discuss terms. You're going to help us expand the network. Mr. Nahuel, your knowledge of Apache culture will be invaluable. Mr. Crowley, your family name still carries weight in certain circles. And Chato, you'll continue to serve as our scout. And if we refuse, then the children die, all of them, starting with the baby." Morrison's man raised his rifle, aiming at Willow. But as he did, something unexpected happened. The infant woke up. She opened her eyes, looked directly at Morrison, and smiled. It was a simple gesture, innocent and pure. But it had an electric effect on everyone present. Even hardened killers found themselves hesitating. "She's just a baby," whispered one of Morrison's men. "She's a mongrel," Morrison snapped. "A half-breed abomination that needs to be eliminated." "She's a child," the man replied. "I ain't killing no child." "Then I'll do it myself." Morrison drew his pistol and aimed at Willow. But as he pulled the trigger, 3 things happened simultaneously. Jacob threw himself in front of the baby, taking the bullet in his chest. Nahuel's knife found Morrison's wrist, sending his gun flying. And Chato, seeing an innocent child about to die, turned his rifle on Morrison's men. "Enough," Chato shouted. "No more children die today." The battle that followed was brief but vicious. Morrison's men, caught between Apache warriors and desperate fathers, fought with the fury of cornered animals. But they were outnumbered and outmatched. When the smoke cleared, Morrison lay dying, his chest pierced by Chato's spear. His fake federal agents were dead or fleeing. And Jacob was bleeding out in the dirt, his life ebbing away with each heartbeat. "The baby," he whispered. "Save the baby." "She's safe," Nahuel said, cradling Willow against his chest. "She's safe." "Good, that's good." Jacob Crowley died with a smile on his lips, knowing that his sacrifice had saved an innocent life. But even as they mourned, Nahuel knew their troubles were far from over. Morrison's network stretched far beyond Silver Creek, far beyond any single town or territory. "What now?" Chato asked. "Now we find your daughter and all the other children. And then we make sure this never happens again." They buried Jacob on the hill overlooking Silver Creek, marking his grave with a simple wooden cross. He had been a white man who chose to die for an Apache child. It was a death that transcended race, that spoke to something deeper and more fundamental. "He was a good man," Chato said. "He was better than good," Nahuel replied. "He was necessary." As they prepared to leave Silver Creek, Nahuel performed one final ritual. He took a handful of dirt from Jacob's grave and mixed it with earth from the Cave of Sorrows. The two soils representing sacrifice and justice would be carried with them as they continued their fight. "And where to now?" Chato asked. "North, to the territories where the law is still being written, where we might be able to build something better. And the children, we'll find them, all of them. And we'll give them what Jacob gave Willow, a chance to grow up free." As they rode away from Silver Creek, Nahuel felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a warrior seeking revenge. He was a father, a protector, a guardian of the innocent, and he would not fail them. 6 months later, the settlement they'd built in the Northern Territories had become a beacon of hope. Haven Valley, nestled in a natural basin surrounded by protective mountains, housed over 60 people. Apache families rescued children, and even some white settlers who'd grown tired of the hatred that poisoned the frontier. But their sanctuary was about to be tested. Agent Mitchell, the corrupt federal officer who had escaped Silver Creek, had not been idle. He'd spent months building a case against Haven Valley, portraying it as a hostile Apache stronghold that threatened regional peace. "Colonel," Mitchell said to the military commander studying the settlement through field glasses, "these people are harboring known criminals, fugitives from justice." Colonel Morrison, the judge's cousin, and a man cut from the same cloth, nodded grimly. "I see children, ye half-breed mongrels, products of illegal unions. They need to be removed and processed according to federal guidelines. And the adults? Executed as an example. This kind of mixing can't be allowed to spread." Colonel Morrison commanded 2 companies of cavalry, over 200 men armed with the latest weapons. They'd also brought artillery, preparing for a siege rather than a simple raid. "When do we attack?" Mitchell asked. "Dawn. We'll hit them before they're fully awake. Make it quick and clean." But the colonel had underestimated his enemy. Haven Valley's residents weren't helpless refugees. They were survivors, fighters, people who had already lost everything once and refused to lose it again. Nahuel stood on the settlement's watchtower, studying the enemy positions through captured field glasses. The odds were impossible: 200 professional soldiers against 50 defenders, most of them women and children. "They're not giving us a choice," he said to Chato, who stood beside him. "No, they're not. The children, hidden in the mountain caves, they'll be safe there. And us, we fight. Because if we don't, they'll just keep coming. Keep killing, keep enslaving." Chato nodded grimly. "The old ways are dying, but we can choose how they die. With honor, with blood." They'd spent the night preparing. Every able-bodied adult was armed, positioned behind carefully constructed barricades. The settlement's layout had been designed with defense in mind, creating overlapping fields of fire and natural choke points. But their greatest advantage was the land itself. Apache warriors had been fighting in these mountains for generations, and they knew every rock, every tree, every hidden path. "Remember," Nahuel told his fighters, "we're not trying to win. We're trying to survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive." "What reinforcements?" asked Sarah, one of the white settlers who joined their cause. "The truth. Mitchell's been operating without proper authorization. When word of this massacre reaches Washington, there will be consequences. And if word doesn't reach Washington, then we die fighting for something worth dying for." The attack came at dawn, just as Morrison had promised. Artillery shells screamed overhead, exploding among the settlement's buildings. Cavalry charged from 3 directions, their sabers gleaming in the morning sun. But they met resistance they hadn't expected. The first wave of attackers ran into carefully prepared obstacles, sharpened stakes, hidden pits, trip wires connected to improvised explosives. Men and horses fell screaming, their charge broken before it reached the settlement's perimeter. "Fall back," Morrison ordered. "Regroup and advance by sections." But as his men regrouped, something unexpected happened. The mountain itself seemed to come alive. Rocks began to fall from the cliffs above, not randomly, but in calculated avalanches that blocked escape routes and separated the attacking force. Trees crashed across trails, creating barriers that channeled the soldiers into predetermined kill zones. "What the hell?" Mitchell demanded. "Apache magic," Morrison replied grimly. "They're using the terrain against us." It wasn't magic, it was careful preparation. Nahuel's fighters had spent months weakening cliff faces, preparing rock slides, creating traps that could be triggered at the right moment. The mountain was their ally, and they were using it to devastating effect. But the military advantage was still overwhelming. For every soldier who fell, 2 more took his place. The settlement's defenders were being pushed back, their ammunition running low. "We can't hold them," Chato said, blood streaming from a head wound. "We don't have to hold them," Nahuel replied. "We just have to make them pay." The turning point came when Morrison's artillery found the range. Shells began landing inside the settlement, destroying buildings, killing civilians. The defenders were forced to abandon their positions and then fall back to the central compound. "Surrender," Morrison called out through a speaking trumpet. "And I'll spare the women and children?" "You're lying," Nahuel shouted back. "Perhaps. But surrender is your only chance to find out." It was a hopeless situation. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and running out of ammunition. But as Morrison's men closed in for the final assault, something unexpected happened. A bugle call echoed across the valley, not the charge, but retreat. "What's happening?" Mitchell demanded. Morrison lowered his field glasses, his face pale. "Riders coming from the south." A dust cloud on the horizon revealed the truth. A full regiment of federal cavalry was approaching, flying the colors of the territorial government. These were real soldiers, not Morrison's corrupt allies. "Sir." A messenger galloped up to Morrison. "Orders from Washington. You're to cease operations immediately." "On whose authority?" "President Grant himself. There's been an investigation. Agent Mitchell is wanted for treason." Mitchell's face went white. "That's impossible. I have protection." "Not anymore. Your network's been exposed. Senators, judges, military officers, they're all under arrest." The corrupt agent drew his pistol, but Nahuel's rifle shot took him down before he could fire. Mitchell fell in the dirt, his schemes finally catching up with him. "Stand down," Morrison ordered his men. "All units stand down." But some of his soldiers, too deep in bloodlust to stop, continued their advance. It was Chato who ended it, stepping into the open with his hands raised. "Enough," he shouted. "No more killing. The children are safe. The truth is known. It's over." Slowly, gradually, the guns fell silent. The siege of Haven Valley was over. In the aftermath, as federal investigators sorted through the wreckage of Morrison's network, the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. The trafficking operation had involved dozens of powerful men, senators, judges, military officers, businessmen. All of them had profited from the suffering of innocent children. How many, Nahuel asked the lead investigator. Over 300 children recovered so far. More facilities are being raided every day. And the perpetrators? Trials are beginning in Denver. The evidence is overwhelming. Most will hang. But for Nahuel, the numbers were just statistics. What mattered was the faces, the children who had been rescued, the families reunited, the future that was now possible. Tahzai was among the recovered children. But the boy who returned was not the son Nahuel remembered. 3 years of brutalization had left deep scars, wounds that might never fully heal. "I'm sorry, Father," Tahzai said during one of their awkward conversations. "I betrayed you. I betrayed our people." "You survived," Nahuel replied. "That's what matters. But at what cost? The cost of being human, of being broken and finding a way to heal. It would be a long journey." Tahzai flinched at sudden movements, spoken whispers, couldn't bear to be alone. But he was alive, and alive meant hope. Chato's daughter, Ayana, was also among the rescued. She was physically unharmed, but emotionally distant, struggling to reconnect with the father she'd been taken from. "She doesn't remember me," Chato said sadly. "She will," Nahuel assured him. "Children heal faster than adults. Give her time." The final truth. As the investigation continued, one final revelation emerged. Willow's true parentage was discovered through Morrison's personal records. She wasn't Nahuel's daughter. She wasn't Morrison's daughter. She was the child of Senator Crawford, one of the network's biggest investors, a man who had publicly campaigned for Apache extermination while privately profiting from Apache suffering. "What does this mean?" Nahuel asked the investigator. "It means she's the most important witness we have. Living proof of the hypocrisy at the heart of this conspiracy. And legally, she's Crawford's legitimate heir. When he's executed, she'll inherit his fortune." The irony was staggering. The baby who had been marked for death would inherit millions from the man who had ordered her killing. Justice had a sense of humor even in the darkest times. 1 year later, Haven Valley had grown into something unprecedented. The settlement now housed over 200 people, Apache, white Mexican, and mixed blood families living together in harmony. They had built schools, hospitals, workshops, and farms. They had created a society where children grew up without fear, where the color of their skin mattered less than the content of their character. Nahuel stood on the same watchtower where he had once prepared for war, now watching children play in the valley below. Willow, now a toddler, was among them, her laughter ringing across the settlement like a bell. "She's beautiful," Itzel said, joining him. His wife had returned from her own ordeal, changed, but unbroken, her spirit tempered by suffering, but not defeated. "She's free," Nahuel replied. "That's more beautiful than anything." "And the others, learning to be free. It's harder than it sounds." Tahzai was working in the settlement school, teaching younger children to read and write. His healing was slow but steady each day, bringing small victories over the darkness in his past. Chato had become the settlement's chief of security, his knowledge of both Apache and white tactics making him invaluable in protecting their growing community. And Jacob was remembered in the settlement's central square, where a simple memorial bore his name and the words, "He chose love over hate, hope over fear." "What's next?" Itzel asked. "More settlements, more children, more hope. And the fight never ends. But now we're not just surviving, we're building something better." As the sun set over Haven Valley, painting the sky the color of old gold, Nahuel felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not the peace of the grave, but the peace of purpose fulfilled. The trafficking network was broken, its leaders dead or imprisoned. The children were safe, healing, learning to dream again. And the future? The future was being written by young hands, in languages both old and new. Willow totted up to him, her arms outstretched. He lifted her, and she pointed to the sunset, babbling in the mixture of Apache and English that had become the settlement's common tongue. "What's she saying?" Itzel asked. "She's saying tomorrow," Nahuel translated. "She's saying tomorrow will be better." "And will it, if we make it so?" They stood together as night fell over Haven Valley, 3 generations united by love rather than blood, by choice rather than chance. The past was buried, the present was secure, and the future belonged to the children.